team at the center stage.
Dr. George Awad was a distinguished Palestinian physician that dedicated his life to contributing to the advancement of psychiatry and psychoanalysis. His beginnings, however, were much more humble. He was born in Akka, Palestine in 1942, and following the War of 1948, he and his family became refugees in Lebanon. With hard work and determination, Dr. Awad graduated from the American University of Beirut from the Faculty of Medicine. He moved to the United States where he did his residency in psychiatry and child psychiatry. After completing his residency, he immigrated to Canada in 1973 where he practiced psychiatry and subspecialized in forensic and child psychiatry. He spent many years acquiring a training analyst designation, but his true passion was his psychoanalytic practice. He became the director of the Family Court Clinic, a department of the Clark Institute, and was a court-appointed expert witness in the best interest of the child. He was also asked to speak at the United Nations and in many other international venues about his experience as a Palestinian psychoanalyst. Throughout his life, George loved teaching. He taught at the University of Toronto, Sick Children's Hospital, and the Clark Institute, as well as at the Toronto Analytic Society. Please, just out of respect for a distinguished man we're trying to honor. He spent time in Lebanon teaching for frontline workers about post-traumatic stress disorder in children and the current methods of treatment. In his final month, he dedicated his effort to authoring a chapter in a book that was to be presented at a conference in Berlin on displaced peoples. Tragically and unfortunately, he didn't make it to present. However, his work was read at the conference. He was a hopeful man who felt that one day there would be a solution to the injustice in the world, and that solution would come from understanding the other. In 2009, he was honored by the International Journal of Applied Psychoanalytic Studies with an issue entirely dedicated to his psychoanalytic perspectives on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. Please join the board and the family in honoring and presenting him with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Following the presentation, we ask Munzir and Macy to make it to the stage to say a few words about Dr. Awad.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention, please? Can I have your attention, please? for what I have to say, at least for the memory of George. Can I please have your silence for just a few minutes? Thank you.
So pleased and proud to be accepted as a member of my husband. He would have been so honored and proud to be here tonight. He would have wanted to be part of the evening and recognize Palestinian professionals for their successes. He would have been proud to be here to be part of helping young Palestinians to find their path to success. George deeply believed in the power of education and worked very hard to try and make it accessible to everyone. It was something that was very close to his heart. At this point, I'd like to introduce his favorite nephew. His favorite nephew, Munzer, who's come all the way from London, England. He would like to speak about George as a man and a person. You heard a lot about his professional life.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It just seems like the noise just comes right back up again after I speak, so maybe I'll just be quiet and hope that will bring about the desired effect. Thank you. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. My name is Munzer Nasser, and I am thrilled and honored to have this opportunity to speak to you on this very special occasion. On behalf of George's family, I would like to first thank the CPPF and everyone else who helped bring about this fitting and memorable tribute to George. But I feel that we owe first a special mention to Lena Bahadih. Is she here, Lena? Lena, sorry. Lena is the unfortunate young lady who kindly accepted the task of compiling George's professional biography. Why do I say unfortunate? I say unfortunate because, as it turns out, there is someone named George Awad, who is a prominent psychiatrist and member of the faculty of the University of Toronto, but who is not the George A. Awad, whom we are honoring tonight. Yes, it's really true, ladies and gentlemen. Two George Awads with very similar professional profiles. What are the chances of that, huh? One's Egyptian, the other is Palestinian. Most psychiatrists in Toronto. So I mean, what are the chances of that? Tough gig, eh? I promise you, this is the last time I'll try to do a Canadian accent. I'll just carry on here. Earlier this evening, you heard about George's professional achievements. They're indeed quite impressive. But I believe that people who knew him well would agree that he deserves to be remembered just as much for the kind of man that he was and for the life he lived, as for his achievements as a mental health pioneer and expert in Canada. Let me tell you what. George was one of my mom's 4 brothers. He liked referring to himself as my favorite uncle. But this, although true, does not begin to describe how much he meant to me. George was and remains one of the people I love and admire most in the world, and the most influential role model in my life. I named my second son George in his honor. He loved his wife deeply and was faithful spoke to her his entire life. It may be a cliche, but in this case, it is true. George and Macy were soulmates. Their long 36-year marriage and 40-year relationship was full of love and happiness. Macy made George a better man and he made her a better woman. Macy was just as dedicated as George to her career as a contemporary artist, but their marriage was always the cornerstone of their lives and the rock from which they drew great strength and security. Born in Akka in 1942, George was a child of the 60s, whose formative influences were the Palestinian Nakba, the Six-Day War, the Arab revolutions, and the anti-Vietnam War movement in the U.S. Never want to get carried away by populist passion, George distilled the ideology of the era into a small set of progressive humanist ideals and principles, which he made his own and which subsequently guided every aspect of his life. Although George never really identified as Lebanese, he felt he owed a huge debt to the country that had taken him in as a 6-year refugee and given him the opportunity to study at AUB, the American University of Beirut, which is and was and remains one of the Middle East's finest institutions of higher learning. So when George and Macy later decided to adopt children, they went to Lebanon. And so when George decided that on 2 separate occasions, they spent several months braving the carnage and chaos of the Lebanese Civil War, putting their own lives at risk in order to realize their dream of having children. But when George and Macy later remembered those days, they felt only profound gratitude for what they saw as the unique privilege of being able to adopt 2 beautiful, wonderful, healthy babies like Gilead and Tara. George deeply felt the obligation, and you've already heard about this, to give something back to Lebanon. Then he spent several summers in South Lebanon working with other European volunteers on helping young children suffering from PTSD. I don't need to tell the people present here, and I think this is an important moment for all of us to reflect. I don't need to tell people what it's like to be a Palestinian in the Western world. Trying to belong and succeed while dealing with some of the negative connotations, stereotypes, and yes, prejudice that we encounter everywhere. I would guess that some of you have on occasion, how shall I say, obfuscated or de-emphasized being Palestinian. I know I have. On different occasions, I've presented myself as Arab American, Christian Arab, Lebanese Christian, American or British, or national Arab origin, or Middle Eastern origin, Lebanese American, and even Arab Brazilian, using my wife's country of origin as a cover despite never having lived in Brazil. Not so for George. Early on in his relationship with Macy, he confided that he felt uncomfortable with the question, "Where are you from?" because his answer was often seen as a political statement. But over time, being Palestinian became not only his deepest national identity and a source of great pride, but also the thing that motivated him to do great things and to challenge negative stereotypes about his people through his acts and deeds. Despite the powerful identity that George had, his powerful, I don't believe he had a grain of prejudice in his body. In George's case, it was in fact true that his best friends throughout his life were Jewish. You may argue that working in the psychiatric profession, he did not have much choice. But nevertheless, one of his closest friends and the best man at his wedding was a recently departed Dr. Alan Kindler, an Australian Jewish psychiatrist also made his home in Toronto. Their friendship was often tested by events in the Middle East, but they remained close and they were very close throughout their entire lives. Sorry, excuse me. With no tribute to George, this is going to Canada now. Thank you. No tribute to George would be complete without a mention of his deep love for Canada. George could have stayed in the United States following his last residency in Ann Arbor, Michigan. But he chose Toronto and often spoke very enthusiastically about what he saw as the open, big-hearted society that was fairer, more just, less individualistic, and less aggressive than the United States. I was often struck by how much he felt at home in his house on Roxborough Street West, and how he never had any wanderlust. He was very happy to go and just be in Toronto all the time. Anyway, just to bring this to a close, I'll just share my last memory, the last time that I personally saw George. I'd say it was the most significant moment of my life when I went to take a special trip to Toronto from London in order to visit him in his hospital room during the critical days he spent waiting for a heart transplant that would save his life. When I saw him, I asked him if he had any regrets. Just one, he answered, that I didn't walk my daughter down the aisle. Vivian and Faraz, her husband, had scheduled a big wedding several months hence. I was a bit skeptical and wondered if he was in the aisle, but that's it. I didn't walk my daughter down the aisle. Over the next few hours, though, we talked as I sat by his bedside or walked around the ward at Toronto General with him. Then I realized this was a man who had come to terms with his fate, who was ready, having lived his life to the full and made every day count. I have only one wish, and that is that I could have had a life as meaningful and fulfilling as George's, where I can wake up one morning and say, I don't want anything more. I'll just leave you with a very happy postscript. George did get his wish to walk his Ilya down the aisle before passing. Ilya after us canceled the big wedding and just did a simple little civil ceremony just a few days before George died.
If the children want to join Claudia and Leah,